Liverpool dates back to the year 1207, when it was granted a charter by King John as a borough and port. It achieved city status in 1880. Its distinctive waterfront is famous throughout the world. It has two cathedrals, the largest Anglican cathedral in the world, having taken 74 years to construct, from 1904 to 1978, and a Roman Catholic cathedral of modern design, which took only 5 years to build in the 1960s. Liverpool is essentially a great Victorian city, developed by entrepreneurs and civic-minded people. It has a vast number of listed buildings, with new ones of good design from the 1990s taking shape. Rodney Street, a street of doctors, is in one of 30 conservation areas. This could be Faulkner Street of a century ago, if only horse-drawn cabs were there instead of cars. Such a transformation does happen from time to time, as Liverpool has been host to many period dramas for the television and film industry. Faulkner Street, for example, was the setting for the TV production Secret Agent in the early 1990s. The Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Society has raised millions of pounds in order to refurbish the 1930s Art Deco Philharmonic Hall. St George's Hall, built in the form of a Greek temple in 1846, was designed by a 23-year-old architect, Harvey Lonsdale. It's the centrepiece of a large group of neoclassical buildings, which include a museum, a library and an art gallery, all dating from Victorian times. Liverpool is also proud of its more recent sculptures, like Epstein's Liverpool Resurgent on Lewis's building, and those that commemorate the Beatles era in the area of the famous cavern. Albert Dock was built in the 1840s, the age of sail and small vessels. It was designed by Jesse Hartley, Liverpool's dock engineer. Both the Merseyside Maritime Museum and the Tate Gallery of the North are now housed in the old warehouses. Albert Dock is the largest Grade 1 listed building in the country and has been developed as both a place in which to live and as a tourist attraction. Its success is such that it's the second largest visitor attraction in the country, with 6 million people coming here every year. So much for the present. Let's travel back in time and look at some aspects of Liverpool life in the 20s and 30s, when the city was very different from what it is now. Our story begins at 10 to 9 on a morning in 1929, when ferries from Wirral disgorged their rush hour passengers. For many, their daily constitutional exercise was an anti-clockwise processional walk on the top deck of the ferry, effectively walking to Liverpool as the boat chugged across the Mersey. At this time, over 25 million journeys a year were made by the ferries as they plied between Liverpool and Rock Ferry, Birkenhead Woodside, Seacombe, Egremont and New Brighton. It's the final summer of the Eastern service. The origins of the Birkenhead ferry go back to the 13th century, when monks from the priory in Birkenhead were granted rights by the king to ferry travellers across the river. Some people worked in offices close to the pier head. Others continued their journeys by electric trams, which ran frequently in all directions from 3 terminal loops. The first electric tram ran in 1898 and the last in 1957. Now let's take a trip through the shopping centre of Lord Street and Church Street. Imagine we're on a bus or tram as we pass the Edinburgh Cafe, Lord Street Arcade and Bunny's on the corner of Whitechapel. Marks and Spencer can be seen where they still are today, and street traders sell their wares outside as they do today. It's 1929 summer sale time in Blacklers' famous store. Limousines line the roadway and trams pass by. Blacklers, formed in 1908, was a partnership between a Mr. Blackler, who already had shops in the city, and a Mr. Wallace, a buyer with Lewis's. The store design was based on Galeries Lafayette in Paris, with balconies overlooking a central well. At the time, it was the biggest store in Liverpool. May 1941 saw the store gutted by fire as a result of city centre bombing, only to be rebuilt in the 1950s to the original design. It finally closed in 1988. How about a new chest of drawers for £5, 10 shillings? (1930) and Blacklers cashiers take their annual outing paid for by the company. They're mostly young girls from 14 years of age. The event took place either in Liverpool or Wirral, but no records of the exact location seem to be in existence. The store would close for a full day on the usual Wednesday half-day closing for Liverpool shops. These girls are the cashiers who worked in the pay kiosks. There were more than 100 of them. The store, in its heyday, employed 1,000 people, so different from staffing levels in departmental stores today. No television and very little radio in the 20s meant that people made their own entertainment. There were no designer clothes to fit the activity you were engaged in. Often men wore their suits, and ladies' outfits were incomplete without hats of many styles. Many of these young people may still be alive today, who knows? The Wallace family and store supervisors managed the games. On the death of Mr. Blackler, the Wallace family took over completely as he had no offspring. Many of the older generation of Liverpudlians have fond memories of Blacklers store, and it's sadly missed. Sefton Park was a pleasant haven in 1933. Regrettably, its famous palm house suffered wanton vandalism in the 1980s. It's the largest civic park in the country and is one of a ring of parks circling the city and constructed in Victorian times. Parks of this type were often financed through the sale of high-quality housing on the periphery of the park. It was a gathering place for mothers and nannies with babies in deep-sided prams with small wheels. On the lake, the Jolly Roger mini-replica sailing ship was a familiar sight. In the 30s, Sefton Park's lake regularly froze over, the winter of 1933 being no exception. Locals took advantage of this by enjoying ice skating and consuming roasted chestnuts. Disaster in July 1933. The Philharmonic Hall is destroyed by fire. The Liverpool Philharmonic Society was founded in 1840 and by 1849 had raised funds to open this building, now gutted by fire. By 1939, the present hall was built in the Art Deco style by Herbert Rouse. To this day, a hydraulic cinema proscenium can be made to rise from beneath the platform to convert the hall into a 1930s cinema. It's the only operating proscenium of this type in the world. A Spartan biplane flies over on a press photo flight. July the 1st, 1933, and Liverpool Airport is opened by Lord Londonderry, Secretary for Air. We see Hawker Fury and Demon fighters, a Cerro Cloud amphibian, Cloud of Iona, of Lord Douglas Hamilton, and a Sierra Autogyro. Parachutists drop from a Fokker F-7. Nine Hawker Hunters of number 25 Squadron provide an aerobatic display. 3 are tied together in one daring stunt. Note the experimental Ferry long-range monoplane which had flown 5,000 miles non-stop earlier in the year. The Hawker Furies end our sequence with a flypast. In 1933, the Mersey road tunnel is inspected as work nears completion. It was the longest underwater road tunnel in the world at the time. The idea originated in 1913 and work started on a modified scheme of 2.13 miles between Birkenhead and Liverpool in 1925. It was officially opened and given the name Queensway by King George V in July 1934. Local people were allowed to walk its length for a small fee donated to charity earlier in the year. Many people who were children at the time still remember the occasion. Officials visit Otterspool Promenade area in 1933 as work progresses on land reclamation on an area used for dumping the city's rubbish. The result was the fine promenade we have today. The party includes Liverpool's well-known MP, Bessie Braddock. Using only simple tools and with no protective clothing, footwear or helmets, digging up roads to lay electricity cables was hard work. There was always a hot coke fire in a brazier, and a cocky watchman kept guard overnight, sitting in his hut in front of the fire. Work goes on in various parts of the city in 1931, laying supplies to homes and the extensive tramway network. These pictures cover Castle Street, Kempston Street, Bedford Street, Kinglake Street and Club Moor. Rural supplies at Tarbock are provided by poles with overhead cables fixed. After all that hard work, how about some apples at 2 old pence a pound? And the park is the place to eat them. This sequence of very old brittle film was saved just in time. It shows the May Day horse parade along Lime Street approaching St George's Hall sometime in the 20s. The parade dated from early Victorian times when carters from all over the country bringing goods to Liverpool decorated their horses and paraded through the streets to welcome the first day of summer. The parade disappeared with the war, but was revived in 1986 for a few years. In the background is the Northwestern Hotel and then Frisbee Dyke's shop in Clayton Square. The Victorian neoclassical buildings in the St George's Hall area and the famous waterfront buildings from the early part of the 20th century escaped complete destruction during the Second World War and thankfully are still with us. Opened in 1893, the Liverpool Overhead Railway, the first overhead electric railway in the world. It eventually covered the line of docks running from Dingle in the south via the Pier Head to Seaforth Sands. It provided good access from the southern residential areas to the docks and the city's commercial area. It complemented the Mersey Railway running under the river from Birkenhead. At the time this film was taken, it was carrying 5 million passengers a year. At the time of the First World War, it was up to 17 million, with a similar boom in the Second World War to 14 million. It was never nationalised as part of British Railways and finally closed in 1956, a unique form of transport gone forever. The light of bird's eye view from 300 feet up. In the distance, the Anglican Cathedral can be seen under construction. The floating roadway provided a link to the vehicle ferries for Wirral, or luggage boats as they were known locally. The backbone of the traffic was still largely horse-drawn, but there were some steam lorries as well. The luggage boats functioned until the early part of the war, in spite of the opening of the new road tunnel. The passenger ferries were very busy all day long, running every 10 minutes on some routes. George's landing stage dates from 1875. Combined with Prince's landing stage, it provided a floating stage a half a mile long. As well as commuter traffic, leisure was well catered for, with services to Eastham to the south and New Brighton, a popular seaside resort, to the north. Let's now take the overhead railway along the docks north of the pier head. The advertising said it affords a panoramic view of 6.5 miles of the finest docks and shipping in the world. The year is 1929, and Liverpool is the principal seaport of industrial England. The Gladstone Dock complex was the largest in the world. Imports of cotton are handled in the docks, while trading takes place in the Cotton Exchange. Nearly half of Britain's exports pass through the port of Liverpool. It's still Britain's largest export port today, handling 27 million tonnes per annum on 1,000 ships and increasing year by year. In 1930, it handled 20 million tonnes on 20,000 ships, which just goes to show how ship sizes have increased. The overhead trains pass the tobacco warehouse, which was the world's biggest warehouse. Fruit imports were dealt with at the fruit exchange auctions and would be in the shops on the same day. Timber importing was another aspect of the port's trade, and here a timber auction is in progress as a large piece of mahogany is moved. Livestock and frozen meat came from places such as Ireland, New Zealand and Australia. Lunchtime in Dockland, and time to think of a flutter on the horses. They're off. The Grand National has taken place at Aintree since 1839. It was so popular that special trains would come from all parts of the country to be stabled in sidings alongside the course. Just over 4 miles long, it's just as famous today as it was 60 years ago. There's been many a fall of beachers. The 1929 winner was Gregallach at 100 to 1. Liverpool looked west to the Atlantic and was regarded as the main port for the Americas and a gateway to the empire. Prince's Landing Stage was the place for transatlantic liners and passenger ships to West Africa and other parts of the world. A White Star liner arrives, causing a flurry of activity. At Riverside Station, alongside the landing stage, the majority of passengers would board a special train for London. Special trains to and from London were timed to link up with the departures and arrivals of all major liners. The 20s and 30s were the heyday of the great liners. Air travel gradually took over their role after the war. The construction of Martin's Bank buildings, now Barclays, and India buildings for the Holt Blue Funnel Line in Water Street shows the wealth and prosperity of the city. Both were under construction at the same time in 1929, and both were designed by Herbert Rouse. Stonemasons continue their work on the cathedral, a task spanning 74 years. The seaside was never far away, and many took trips by electric train northwards to places like Blundellsands for relaxing days out. Alternatively, you could take the ferry to New Brighton on the Wirral coast, Or, if you were more comfortably off, go by chauffeur-driven car to your beach hut on Harrison Drive. June 17th, 1939, and the new Mauritania completes loading and makes ready to sail on her maiden voyage to New York. Built by Camel Laird of Birkenhead, she was launched on July the 24th, 1938. Her shops, dance floor, pool and Turkish baths were stripped out before the end of the year after only a few voyages between London and New York, and the vessel became a troop ship visiting various parts of the world. She survived the war and, after refurbishment, reverted to passenger service in 1946 and was finally scrapped in 1965. About the same time as the Mauritania became operational and the threat of a Second World War loomed, preparations were taking place at Linacre Lane power station for the assembly of gas masks. Shortly after war broke out, everyone in the country was issued with one that had to be carried with you wherever you went. Most people working here are dressed in police-style uniforms. for assembly came in airtight tins. Windows are bricked up in current stock power station switch house to prevent damage in the event of bomb blasts. A Lewis gun post is mounted on the roof. To end our look at Liverpool in the 20s and 30s, let's go back from 1939 to more peaceful times, back 10 years to 1929. The working day is over, it's time to buy a Liverpool Echo or an evening express, and then home, blissfully unaware of the traumas to come a decade later. As always, the people of Merseyside and Liverpool would step into and survive the uncertainties and adversities of the future with a resilience and humour which have for so long been the hallmark of this great city.